A few days ago, a man with a shotgun, a handgun, and a bag full of knives charged through a metal detector at the White House Correspondents' Dinner and fired a round toward a staircase where the President of the United States was sitting. This was the third serious attempt on Donald Trump's life in under 2 years. And every single time something like this happens, you hear the same thing. Both sides need to lower the temperature. It sounds reasonable, but it is also a lie. When you actually look at who's pulling the triggers and then who's cheering when it happens, there is no both sides. Certainly not anymore. This is a one-sided problem, and it's getting very, very dangerous. To understand how we got here, you need to see how fast this has moved. It starts in the summer of 2024. A 20-year-old climbs onto a rooftop at a Trump rally in Butler, Pennsylvania, and opens fire with a rifle. While the bullet barely missed Trump, a rally-goer named Corey Compatore is killed shielding his family. 2 months later, another man is found lying in wait at Trump's golf course in Florida with a rifle and a loaded magazine. He had been there for 12 hours, even left a note offering $150,000 to anyone who could complete the job. Today, he's now serving life. 2 assassination attempts on a presidential candidate in the space of a single summer, and America seemingly just moved on. Then comes Luigi Mangione. In 2024, he walks up behind a healthcare CEO on a Manhattan sidewalk and shoots him in the back. What happened next is almost more disturbing than the murder itself, because America didn't recoil. A huge chunk of it actually celebrated. Nearly a third of Democrats told CBS it was acceptable to feel good about it. Within months, a man firebombed the Pennsylvania governor's mansion, with the governor's family inside, by the way, over Gaza. 2 Israeli embassy staffers were then gunned down outside a museum in DC, with the shooter shouting, "Free Palestine," as he was dragged away. And shortly after, an armed Antifa cell launched a coordinated assault on an ICE detention center in Texas. They did this after stockpiling over 50 firearms and running reconnaissance like a military operation. 9 of these people were convicted on terrorism charges this March, the first federal Antifa terrorism convictions in American history. And of course, there's Charlie Kirk. He was assassinated mid-sentence in front of 3,000 people at a college campus in Utah. You'd think attitudes would have changed in America by this point, but no, because within hours, the celebration started again. Not from anonymous trolls, from professionals with real names, teachers, media figures. So many people publicly cheered a murder that companies had to start firing them. And only a few days ago, a man with a shotgun tried to add a president to the list. The third attempt on Trump's life in under 2 years. That's the trajectory. That's how fast it's moving. Now, when someone tells you this is a both sides problem, ask yourself one question. Where is the equivalent list on the other side? Quick note before we move on, please remember to give the video a like and hit subscribe. This channel is almost entirely fan supported, so if you want to support the work and the mission behind it, consider joining Patreon. That's what keeps the channel alive and gives you early access. It's completely ad-free on longer and uncensored videos, written articles, and member-only chats. Jihadist violence and right-wing violence has always dominated in America. That is true. However, that has since changed. In September 2025, the Center for Strategic and International Studies, which is about as non-partisan as think tanks get, published a report that made one thing very clear. For the first time in over 30 years, left-wing terrorist attacks and plots in the United States outnumbered those from the far right. Left-wing incidents averaged less than 1 per year in the 90s. By the late 2010s, it was about 4 per year. In the first half of 2025 alone, before Kirk was even killed, there were 5. Meanwhile, right-wing incidents, which had averaged 20 per year for over a decade, dropped to just 1. But incidents are also one half of the story. The other half is what people believe. In April 2024, NPR and PBS asked Americans whether political violence might be necessary to get the country back on track. Among Democrats, 12% said yes. By October 2025, after Kirk, after Mangione, after the ICE attack, that number had jumped to 28%. That's a 16-point jump in 18 months, the single largest shift in any partisan group that poll has ever recorded. Republicans went from 28 to 31, a 3-point move. The surge is almost entirely on the left. And it's not just that poll. A Gallup study found the single strongest predictor of support for political violence is in party affiliation. It's age. Adults under 30 are the most likely to say violence is justified, and heavy social media users are right behind them. After Mangione killed Thompson, a survey of college students found 45% sympathized with the shooter. 41% of Gen Z said the killing was morally justified. And here's an irony that really drives this home. The Southern Poverty Law Center, the organization that built its entire reputation on tracking right-wing extremism, was federally indicted last month. The charge? Funneling over $3 million to informants embedded in groups like the KKK and Aryan nations over nearly a decade. The DOJ's allegation is that the SPLC was effectively bankrolling the very extremism it fundraised off opposing. It seems even when there is right-wing violence, it might just be funded by leftist organizations. We are watching an entire generation be taught through podcasts, through the algorithmic architecture of platforms like Blue Sky and TikTok, that some people deserve to die for political reasons, and that believing this makes you brave. And because governments allow left-leaning platforms like Blue Sky to escape the sort of monitoring they are imposing elsewhere, even opposing voices are drowned out, or worse, punished legally. That's exactly why I use Proton VPN and why I think you should too. They're based in Switzerland, outside the reach of US, EU, UK, and Australian law. They don't keep logs and are built by the same team behind Proton Mail. When the UK passed its surveillance laws, Proton VPN became the #1 app on the App Store. Their stealth protocol beats censorship firewalls. Secure Core routes your traffic through privacy-first countries, and NetShield blocks trackers before they ever reach you. I've used Proton Mail since Australia announced sweeping surveillance laws last year, and I'm not exaggerating when I say it's now essential. If you want to protect your privacy and support this channel, hit the link below to get up to 60% off Proton VPN. Now, there is a concept in counterterrorism research called a permission structure. It's the ecosystem of language, culture, and social reinforcement that makes an individual feel that violence is not just acceptable, but morally necessary. And the permission structure on the American left right now is operating in plain sight. Here's how it works. Step 1. You label your political opponent not as wrong, not as misguided, but as an existential threat. A fascist, a Nazi, Hitler, a threat to democracy itself.
Do you think Donald Trump is a fascist?
Yes, I do.
This is what kicking the out of fascism looks like.
Comparing the tactics of Donald Trump to Mussolini and Hitler is a very legitimate thing.
We have a Timo Hitler in the White House right now.
This has been mainstream Democratic messaging for years. Step 2. Prominent voices begin to argue that violence against such a threat isn't really violence. It's self-defense or resistance. On April 22nd of this year, 3 days before the Correspondents' Dinner shooting, the New York Times published a podcast episode featuring Hassan Piker, one of the world's most prominent leftist streamers. He described the murder of Brian Thompson as social murder by the healthcare industry, and who has previously said on stream about a sitting US senator, if you cared about Medicare fraud, you would kill Rick Scott.
Engels wrote about the concept of social murder. And Brian Thompson, as the United Healthcare CEO, was engaging in a tremendous amount of social murder, the systematized forms of violence, the structural violence of poverty, the for-profit paywalled system of healthcare in this country. And the consequences of that are tremendous amounts of pain, tremendous amounts of violence, tremendous amounts of deaths. And that was a fascinating story for me because Americans are very draconian.
Step 3. The people who act on this logic use the exact same language. Cole Allen's manifesto called Trump a and traitor, and argued that refusing to act violently against him made you complicit in the oppressor's crimes. That's not fringe ideology. It really isn't. That is the logical endpoint of rhetoric you can hear on any given night on cable news in America, or read in any major newspaper's opinion section. But we can go further. Cole Allen wasn't some dropout foreigner in a basement. He had an engineering degree from Caltech, one of the most selective universities on Earth, a master's in computer science, a teaching award. He was, by every conventional measure, smart. But intelligence in one domain doesn't make you immune to radicalization. If anything, it makes you more confident that your political conclusions are as well-reasoned as your engineering proofs. Allen spent over 1,000 posts on Blue Sky inside a platform specifically designed to create ideological monocultures. He came out the other end convinced he was the only person willing to do what needed to be done. A researcher at Open Measures described his posts as clearly left-wing but lacking a defined extremist ideology, which is exactly the point I'm trying to make. He didn't need an extremist ideology. The mainstream one was enough. This is the part that I think gets underreported more than anything else. After Charlie Kirk was murdered, an academic paper from the International Institute for Counterterrorism documented how Kirk had been systematically dehumanized online in the months before his death. He was effectively treated as a caricature rather than a human being. The researchers found this process lowered the emotional and moral barriers that usually make violence feel unacceptable. And then, when he was killed, the celebration was immediate. Not from the fringe, from professionals, from teachers, from media figures, from people with blue check marks and real names. After Mangione killed Thompson, it was the same thing but bigger. Murals, fan art, a legal defense fund that raised over $1 million. There's a term for this now, Luigi leftism, the normalization and then celebration of political violence wrapped in the language of justice. The academic version is assassination culture, a digital environment where political killing isn't taboo anymore. It's suggested and cheered. And the infrastructure supporting this isn't hidden either. It's on the New York Times podcast page. It's on Blue Sky's trending feed. It's in the gap between what Democratic politicians say at press conferences and what their base actually believes and celebrates when they think the cameras are off. And I want to add something here because I think it needs saying. What we're watching isn't just some left-wing violence problem in isolation. It's converging with something else. Over the past few years, through what some call the Red-Green Alliance, we have seen Western leftists not just tolerating, but actively championing violence carried out under an Islamist banner. A man firebombs a Jewish governor's home over Gaza and gets solidarity, not condemnation. Embassy staffers are murdered in Washington and influencers tell their audiences to support his actions. This is the same left that will march under Hamas flags in London and then call you a bigot for questioning it. In many ways, the modern Western left has become a kind of new age jihadist movement, not in theology, but in function.
Let's talk about our favorite flags.
Oh, like overall, what my favorite flag? Yeah. Hezbollah. Look it up. Oh. I'm not even kidding. It's actually a dope flag.
They've adopted the same certainty that violence is righteous. They've also adopted the same dehumanization of the target and the same celebration of the act. The theological justification has been swapped out for a political one. Fascist instead of infidel. Resistance instead of jihad. But the permission structure is identical and the bodies are just as real. Look, the scariest thing about Cole Allen isn't that he was crazy. It's that he wasn't. He was educated. He was employed. He was a person of faith. He did what 1 million other people in his digital ecosystem talk about doing every single day. He just took it literally. And until we're honest about where the next Cole Allen is coming from and the culture that's producing him, it's going to keep happening.
In the neon haze of a broken dawn, steel towers hum, but the wild runs on. A shadow moves through the circus below, half machine, half beast, with a violet glow. They thought the outback was lost to the flame, but a ding